delayed start. I'm sure you all understand some of the reasons why. Can I very much welcome two people here this morning, the Mayor of London, Mayor Sadiq Khan, and also Robin Gisby, who's going to talk to us a bit later on about what's happening on Transpennine Railways. A very warm welcome to all members, to new members whose first meeting it is. You're more than welcome. I was last week looking forward to a relatively normal Transport for the North meeting to cover some of our usual topics, but to use that wonderful expression that was once used by a former Prime Minister about what he feared most in life when he said events, we certainly had some events to change a bit of the focus as to our meeting, but it is a timely meeting because obviously things are under consideration, and as Transport for the North we've got to be very clear on what is to the best benefit for the transport infrastructure of the North and across the whole region. So with that as opening, can I ask for any apologies that we've got? We've got any?
Yes, Chairman, I believe we've got apologies from Blackpool, East Riding of Yorkshire and North East Lincolnshire.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I have to ask if anybody is required to give a declaration of interest as to any of the items that we've got on the agenda. Nobody's given any previous indication and there's no indication now. I want to just to approve the minutes of the previous meeting, and on this, with the Chief Executive will go through his paper, paper 24, and it will be on the back of this that I will then ask Mayor Khan to address the meeting once we finish with Martin's bit, and then Councillor Gittings is going to move a motion, and it's going to be seconded by Rupert, and then we'll start the debate on the motion which has been circulated. Does that reach everybody's approval? Oh, sorry.
Just wonder at what point you'll be taking questions on that item, or comments.
I'll take any procedural points that people want after Mayor Khan has spoken. Okay? Thank you very much indeed. Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You've got the minutes of the previous meeting. Normally I've done a verbal update on matters arising. We thought it might be easier just to send you with a short one-pager. You'll see one of the items on the matters arising is HS2 Northern Powerhouse Rail, which is an opportunity for you to have that conversation. Apart from that, there's nothing else I want to add. We have included as part of that update a copy of the quarterly operating report. We do share this with members separately normally, but we thought it would be better to just visibly share it at the meeting as part of the board pack. But Chair, nothing else to add. I would suggest we move on to inviting guests to talk.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Sadiq, Mayor Khan. May be so cheeky. Thank you very much for finding time to join us this morning. You have seen a tremendous transformation as far as London is concerned by the opening of the Elizabeth line. And anybody who's not had the opportunity to use the Elizabeth line, I would strongly recommend they look at just the transformational effect that is actually having on the city. And that is a project. I know some people said it was 3 years late. It wasn't 3 years late. It was 30 years late. It had been talked about a long, long time ago, and it's a long time in coming. But nobody can be under any doubt as to the impact that's having on London and the impact it's had on some of the outer parts of London as well. And I always, one of the things I've sort of noted in the past is we often have in the early stages of benefit cost analysis, we sometimes don't review that after something's been up and running and say how long those figures initially were on the benefit cost analysis, because it actually has a better impact than we ever anticipated, but we just take that for granted. So on that and the opening of that and the work that's going on around at the moment at Euston and the problems that's causing for you in London, perhaps you'd like to address the meeting.
Well, Patrick, it's a pleasure to be here. Can I say what a pleasure it is to be here? I'm just sorry it's under these circumstances. I've been told to say It's a pleasure to be in God's own country. but it's great to be here, Patrick. Can I start by starting by where you ended, which is we're still benefiting from a Victorian train line. And I simply don't think it's sensible for the 21st century for you to be relying upon 19th century infrastructure. It's nonsensical. But I'm here for two reasons. One is to say to you, you have the full support of London in relation to your concern, your anger, your frustrations, what we've heard over the last couple of weeks in relation to High Speed 2 and Northern Powerhouse Rail, but to share with you the impact on us in London and the South East if the government's plans, as they've been leaked, appear to be true. So I'll focus my comments, Patrick, with your permission, just on London and the South East, but can you take from me my full support in relation to the impact on you if it doesn't proceed north of Birmingham. So Euston is currently a construction site. Euston was the plan for the HS2 to end in the south, in the centre of our city. We've had, over the last few years, homes that have been demolished, businesses destroyed, and communities feeling let down by temporary construction. And the idea that the end terminal in perpetuity would be not in Euston, but 6 miles west in Old Oak Common is just staggering for a variety of reasons. For those that don't know, Old Oak Common is in the London Borough of Ealing in Acton, 6 miles west of central London. There's only one line that connects Old Oak Common with other parts of London public transport. That's the Elizabeth line. And to get from Birmingham to the centre of London on High Speed 2 will take longer than the current West Coast main line because it doesn't go to the centre, it goes 6 miles west of central London. You have to change twice to get to the centre of our city. So my concerns are firstly a High Speed 2 train that is slower between Birmingham and London than the current rail line. Secondly, permanent blight in Euston in relation to homes, businesses, communities being let down. But thirdly, we don't get the benefits of High Speed 2 if it stops at Birmingham. That's not me being disparaging towards Birmingham or the Western Midlands, but our benefit was the greater connectivity capacity with North in relation to the regions in Yorkshire, Manchester and other parts of the north of England. And Patrick, to tell you that I've been inundated with businesses over the last 5-6 days concerned, these are London businesses, about what's been leaked. I've been understated to say if I'd say there's been dozens and dozens. We've been bombarded by business leaders worried about the uncertainty, the lack of ambition, and the chaos that engenders from long-term planning not being carried through. The final point I'll make, because I know you've got a busy session ahead, is I can't think, and I was the Crossrail Minister in 2009 when Andrew Adonis was in the House of Lords, and I also was the Minister who finished the Elizabeth line and the High Speed 2 Minister as well. I can't think of a better example of public policy failure and a worst example of squandering of taxpayers' money that if the plans that have been leaked appear to be true in relation to High Speed 2 not happening north of Birmingham and not happening to the centre of London. The final point I want to say to you is this, colleagues. The success of the North is crucial to London's success. And I'll give you a couple of examples. I'm speaking next to colleagues here. We've got the expertise, the engineering, or the capacity to build the buses that are built in West Yorkshire, or the trains built in East Yorkshire for the Piccadilly line, or some of the development that took place in the Elizabeth line that took place in the north of the country. And so we need your regions to be flourishing and thriving, and that's why we think HS2 is so important for us, but also as a nation as well. But, we're with you, and anything we can do to support you, we will do. And the final thing to say, Patrick, is, we are from different regions as mayors, but I think we speak with one voice in relation to our commitment to High Speed 2 as has been planned.
Steve, thank you very much indeed, and thank you for finding the time to come up today to Leeds to update us on what your thinking is. We've got a motion which has been submitted by Councillor Gittings and Councillor Sorbeck. Louise, do you want to... Sorry, Andy, did you want to... Sorry, Mayor Burnham, did you want to...
I'll take Louise's lead. If Louise wants to present the motion, then maybe if I come in, Chair, yeah.
Is that okay? All right, okay. Councillor Gittings and then Councillor Swarbeck to second the motion.
Thank you very much, Chair. One of the greatest strengths we've always had as a board is that we speak with one voice for the North, one voice for our residents and one voice for our businesses. And I think it's really important that we continue to do that. And what we've always been absolutely clear about is that for the North to benefit, we need delivery of Northern Powerhouse Rail and HS2 together. We can't have one without the other. It has to be the two. And I was absolutely horrified when I heard the rumours coming out about the cancellation of HS2, potential cancellation of HS2. This will have a devastating impact on the North. And I just want to give you a few details of the impact it will have on Cheshire and Warrington. We don't often talk about Cheshire and Warrington, but HS2 is going to be absolutely crucial for us. And we've put together some figures, and if you multiply this against across the North, the impact it will have. So we think if HS2 is delivered, it will add £2 billion per annum to our GVA. It will create 27,000 new jobs and deliver 6 million square feet of new commercial floor space and 25,000 new homes. That is in Cheshire and Warrington alone, with a population of just over 1 million people. So if we multiply that across the North, what is the impact that the cancellation of HS2 will have? So I think we need to continue to stand together and have that one voice and send a very clear message to government. And the resolution is before you, and it's about reaffirming our unanimous position that we've always had, that in our statutory advice to government, don't forget we offer the government statutory advice, that we must transform the North by building both HS2 and NPR in full. And if we go back 2 years to when we found out about NPR, we all stood together, even though it wouldn't affect some of us. We all stood together in that one voice to say that we needed NPR to transform the North. But quite frankly, we can't have NPR without HS2. So I'd like to put forward the resolution that you've got before you, and I hope that we get 100% support for this. Thank you, Chair.
Driscoll is wishing to move an amendment, so I'll have to go to Mayor Driscoll next, after Councillor Swarbeck.
Chairman, thank you. Lancashire's position on this board is one of solidarity, and I haven't got the impressive statistics that my colleague has brought. And of course, I might add a piece in here about understanding that reviewing costs is always good housekeeping, but the greater prize for an infrastructure project like this, which is HS2 and NPR together, is that it's for multiple generations ahead. It's not just for now. This is the railways are 200 years old, and this project can last for 200 years as well, and those are the benefits. So, with no further ado, I'd be delighted to second the resolution as presented.
Thank you very much. Mayor Driscoll, you wish to move an amendment?
Thanks, Chair. The amendment is to change the end of the first sentence, just to add, with Northern Powerhouse Rail as the priority. So that first paragraph would then read, Transport for the North reaffirms its unanimous position as set out in our statutory advice to government, that we must transform the North by building both HS2 and NPR in full, with Northern Powerhouse Rail as the priority. We've just heard that what we're talking about is infrastructure for future generations. The reality is that in the northeast at the moment, there is one track north and one track south, and that's 166 years old. If we proceed, as the government is indicating, and we do successfully even get HS2 built to Manchester, that would leave us in a position of it being completed when? We're not entirely sure. That would put us to the point where it may then be in the 2040s, 2050s, when we're able to increase the capacity of the East Coast Main Line, which at the moment is so constricted you can only get 6 trains an hour in there. There is no benefit to HS2 to the northeast unless we have NPR. My concern is that if we give an ambiguous message that, OK, we'll have both, but we'll have one for this generation and one for the next generation, that isn't good. So just to make sure that we're all benefiting, as NPR would benefit the whole of the north of England.
Is there a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Keane. Okay. Do you want to say anything in seconding that?
Thank you, Sharon. Just a general point, and I think it's an important point to make, and that is that the strength of TFN is in its cross-party operation. I think that's why we've been so successful since 2018. And on important issues like HS2, I feel it's critical that they do not become red versus blue issues. We are strongest when we speak as one for the North. I am slightly concerned that that cross-party integrity of TNN could be at risk of being undermined today. And I think it's important that we don't do that. I think that could be counterproductive. So really, very clearly to say, let's speak as one for the North, let's protect the integrity of TFN, and I think as the youngest member of the TFN board, I hope that we can deliver a railway network that is fit for the next generation. Thank you.
Okay, well in that case it is now open for debate. I think I've had lots of... Louise, go on.
Just query something. The comment was made about cross-party support. This motion is actually supported by the other vice chair, so it is cross-party. So perhaps you could just change what you've just said because it's not true. Thanks.
Let's have a reflection and a bit of a debate. Thank you, Councillor Gittins, for that. I know Mayor Brabourne and Mayor Burnham wish to come in, let's start with Mayor Brabourne, as means we are in Leeds first.
Thank you so much, Chair. And you'll have seen this morning the mayors coming together, standing together to say that government cannot U-turn on HS2 to connect the 4 biggest cities in the country to pull that investment is short-termism in the extreme and would impact on the growth of our regions and the growth of across the whole country and is economic vandalism. To the motion, I support it 100%. To the amendment, I vehemently disagree with the amendment. The amendment sets us at a position where it's either or. And I think TFN has been a board that has always said we shouldn't have to choose between one project over another. And many hours and years of work has gone into developing TFN's plan, which is HS2 in full. The Y shape makes it economically viable. HS2 in full, Northern Powerhouse Rail in full with that through stop in Bradford. We can't get that without a HS2 to Manchester. And when the leg from Birmingham to Leeds was scrapped, Andy and others stood by us here in West Yorkshire, and we are standing shoulder to shoulder with him and his region to say we will not be set against each other. This is for the good of the whole country. And businesses, to Sadiq's point, businesses across the north are saying with their hands in the air, this is ridiculous because what we need is certainty and consistency over successive governments that could be different political iterations. So just to say, I absolutely disagree with the amendment. We cannot be allowed to have to horse trade what we need for our regions when we have Victorian infrastructure. And certainly I do value the Mayor of London coming here today because this is not about just our growth, but this is in the public interest that we get this right for future generations.
Okay, thank you very much. Mayor Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to echo that last point, that I think we're all grateful, Sadiq, that you've come to this meeting today to show us your support for what we're arguing for, and I think everybody here appreciates that. But I hope I speak for the whole board in saying that we would want to show our support for what you are saying, the argument you've put forward about HS2 in London. People travelling from the north of England don't want to find themselves 6 miles outside of central London. It makes no sense for a national project on this scale not to go right into the heart of London. If you build it right, is the simple message, because it does make a statement about this country and whether we can do big infrastructure properly. And I know lots of the people on this board, we are patriotic people. We want to see our capital city with the right infrastructure for the future. And our argument here has never been about take off London to give to us. What we've always said is that we want the same, we want equal treatment and the same infrastructure. And if this line is to sort of represent a country that is one country, that therefore it should be a line that unites the country and provides the same standard for passengers all the way up that line. And if this decision goes ahead, it would be a statement of a country that, certainly in the sort of Whitehall part of it, doesn't think like that and thinks that some places are more equal than others. And you being here today challenges that, and we really appreciate you being here to challenge that, and I hope your presence here is noted by those who are having these discussions at the moment. Chair, if I might say something about the motion, and particularly the concept that's at the heart of it, that we mustn't be forced to choose between north-south infrastructure or east-west infrastructure. We all know in this room that the north of England needs both. We know that there is regular chaos on the east-west lines across the country. We've spoken about that many times here at this board. But we also know that on the West Coast Main Line there are regular disruptions to people's journeys, that the capacity simply isn't there, and it doesn't take much for it to go wrong. There was huge disruption at Preston this week. So both lines are not 21st century ready. There is not enough capacity. And while I am grateful for the support that's been given, particularly to Manchester, because this does affect us directly, of course, this will affect investment decisions in our city region if the government goes ahead and pulls the plug. So it does have a perhaps bigger impact on us. But I think it does affect everybody in the room, because that capacity that comes through the new infrastructure north of Birmingham, through Crewe, and it's critical for Crewe, of course, not just for us, and then into Cheshire, Manchester Airport, everybody uses that, and then through the city. That is at the heart of Northern Powerhouse Rail. And if it's only by getting that new infrastructure, new lines, east-west and north-south, that we as a board then will be able to have confidence that the railways of the north of England are then acceptable for future generations. They are not until we get both. And that's why we mustn't be forced to make a choice at this stage. And that's why I am confident that the motion as put forward by the Vice Chair and supported by the other Vice Chair is the correct motion, and I don't think we should be amending it at this stage. I understand the spirit in which it's being put forward, but we've found with Northern Powerhouse Rail that it's been a bit shifting sands over the years. We've had a view of what we think Northern Powerhouse Rail is, but we know there's a different view, and I've even heard it that the upgrade to Transpennine route might be then rebranded as Northern Powerhouse Rail. So I would see a danger in accepting the amendment that's been put forward, even though I understand the spirit in which it's been put forward. And so I would say to colleagues, please do support the main motion with unanimity, if we can, around this board. We do appreciate the support that colleagues have shown to Greater Manchester in the last few days, and let's hold our ground and be strong here, because this has fundamental ramifications for the size of the economy in the north of England in the rest of this century. If we kind of trade down and just accept second best, we will be failing future generations. We've been promised this repeatedly. It's 10 years since George Osborne came to Manchester, made his famous Northern Powerhouse speech, which promised HS2, HS3, Transpennine route upgrade, platforms 15 and 16 at Manchester Piccadilly, you name it, all of that was promised, but how much of that has been delivered? And this is what's at stake here. We can't anymore live in a country where big promises like that are made and then people walk away from them. If they're made, they should be delivered. And the north of England, in my view, deserves absolutely nothing less than all of that being delivered. So thank you, Chair, and thank you to all colleagues on the board for your support.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. I understand that the Mayor for London has got to leave now. So can I thank you very much for coming up today and well understand the pressures on your diary. Thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, we will now carry on. Councillor Hughes, followed by Councillor Brown, the next two speakers.
Thanks, Chairman. I will be supporting the motion, but not the amendment. And I noted the comments about us needing to act with one or speak with one voice where it's possible. That won't always be feasible, but where we can, I think we should. So I'm a little surprised that, this amendment is being moved here today. Possibly my reasons for not supporting the amendment may differ slightly from those of the previous speaker who adopted that position. I represent Westmoreland Furness, which isn't solely the Lake District, although let's think of it as the Lake District. And although we do strongly support the construction of Northern Powerhouse Rail linking east and west, actually it's far more important to my area of the country that HS2 gets built and extended as far as possible north as resources will permit. And one omission from the motion, I have to say, even though I will be supporting it, is again this elephant in the room of what will be the ultimate cost of HS2. And I find it a little ironic that given that this is causing so many of the problems, actually there's no reference to finance in the motion. Nevertheless, HS2 is essential for us, and therefore I would not want to be prioritising Northern Powerhouse Rail ahead of it. I'd like to see them both built, but my local authority knows where it stands. So just to repeat, I'll be keenly supporting the motion, but I'm afraid not the amendment.
Thank you, Chair. Well, Japan has its famous bullet train, China the maglev, the USA high-speed rail, and Sweden the Bothnia line. Meanwhile, the country that gave the world the train risks becoming the world's slow coach, relying on Victorian infrastructure that is no longer fit for purpose. And I think it's a sad indictment of modern Britain if we're being told that we can no longer afford to invest in strategic rail infrastructure in a way that we could afford 200 years ago. What this says about us is that we're a nation going backwards, not forwards. I've no doubt that our Victorian forebears will have had similar conversations and debates to those that we'll be having today. Well, fortunately, they had the energy, the enthusiasm, and not least the determination to make strategic investment in this country's future. Today's politicians must do no less. Business needs confidence to invest, but the continued speculation and delay are eroding that confidence. Similarly, local authorities have made their own investment priorities. Cheshire East Council, for example, has already committed £11.2 million to building its regeneration aspirations around this project. A lot of the government's focus has been on the cost of the project, and this is perhaps understandable, but a proper economic analysis must also take into account the long-term benefits the project will bring to the north of England, to our economies and to our transport network. Firstly, capacity across our crumbling and congested northern rail network. HS2 is not about speed, nor is it about a fast train to London. It's about freeing up the capacity so that we can get the regular, reliable services upon which businesses, commuters and visitors expect in an advanced Western nation. Secondly, economic growth. HS2 is estimated to generate £2 billion of gross value added per annum to the economy of Cheshire and Warrington alone, whilst 5 to 7 trains an hour will deliver £750 million of GVA and 5,000 new jobs just in crew. Just think what it can do for the whole of the north of England. And thirdly, levelling up. HS2 will be the first new heavy rail line built north of London since Queen Victoria was on the throne. We're told that the final cost of the Elizabeth line was around £19 billion. Just think what a difference that kind of investment could have made for the north of England's infrastructure. Instead, the only commitment we have is to build a high-speed line from Birmingham to Old Oak Common, somewhere most people have never heard of. We've had a promise of levelling up. This then became levelling off, and now is levelling down. If the commitment to levelling up was genuine, construction would have begun in Manchester or Leeds. The Prime Minister has told us that transport infrastructure is a key part of levelling up, but that it includes projects such as improved bus services and fixing potholes, as well as strategic rail investment. Well, our bus service improvement plan certainly wasn't funded. We haven't had any levelling up funding, and our road repair grant was cut by 21% in 21-22 and has been frozen ever since. The opposition must hold the government to account on this and at the same time affirm unequivocally its own commitment to HS2 and NPR in full. The TfN board must send a strong message to both parties, and I hope the resolution before us today will enjoy the unanimous support of those present. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Mayor Coppard.
Thank you, Chair. And just for the avoidance of doubt, I will be voting in favour of the motion and not in favour of the amendment. Indeed, I actually hope we don't have to vote on an amendment. Just on the point that was made by Councillor Brown, I'm reminded that this year is the centenary year of the Flying Scotsman. And next month, the Flying Scotsman will be coming back to its home, Doncaster, in South Yorkshire. And yet, I'm also minded that it will likely be running on tracks that were laid at around the same time it was built. Maybe a little bit before even. But I think that is deeply disappointing. And, I do kind of think sometimes, did the Victorians sit round in rooms like this and have questions put to them like the ones we're being asked to decide on about whether we should do one or the other? And I don't think they did. I think they built everything they could because they saw the value of infrastructure. And I think that's a really important point to hold on to. On the train up here, I was reading some of the things that were said, both in the run-up to the 2019 election and then at the time when the eastern leg of HS2 was cut. Boris Johnson said that this country was like a coiled spring. That's the phrase he used. And at the moment, we feel more like a wonky table because we are not getting the investment in the north that we deserve in our transport infrastructure that we need in order to grow our economies and support our communities. And the very fact that we are now having a conversation about whether we want to choose between one set of infrastructure or another just points to the fundamental weakness and problem that we've faced for decades. And I don't think we should allow that question to be posed. When the eastern leg was cut, the government's line at the time was, don't worry, it's still going up the western leg and it will go up to Manchester and then carry on. And you will also get Northern Powerhouse rail in full. And I guess the question that I would pose to both Councillor Duncan and Mayor Driscoll would be, do you genuinely believe that if we were to see HS2 cut going up to Manchester, that western leg cut and done away with, that we would not be back here in another year's time if we have this government in another year's time, being asked to then decide whether or not actually should we do all of Northern Powerhouse Rail? Actually, which bits do we want to get rid of Northern Powerhouse Rail? How do we scale back our ambition for Northern Powerhouse Rail? We will again be asked to choose about whether or not we want to do some of that or all of that. And it will continually be a question about what we do want to fund. And we have to stay strong. We have to stand together collectively, everyone around this table, I hope, and say to the government that actually we are not going to allow them to take those decisions or take that away from us, because we want it all, and we want it all for our communities, on behalf of our communities, and we are not going to allow them to make us make that choice. So, look, I stand firmly behind the motion, absolutely in support of what my colleagues have said, because I do think it is of significant importance that we don't allow this salami slicing to keep on happening to our transport infrastructure in the north, and that we are not forced to choose. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mayor Overy.
Thanks, Chair. I won't repeat what Mayor Coppard and Councillor Brown have said, but I too understand the spirit in which the amendment is being moved, but I'll be speaking on behalf of the motion, because the thing that undermines TFN consensus is when nuanced or parochial interests are promoted above unanimity. And I think we've got something that everybody can buy into, and that's really important, because we need to send a single voice and a single message back to central government, and I think we can get people to buy into what's already tabled. Look, Louise spoke before and is absolutely right. You can't have NPR without either one of two things, without HS2 infrastructure or without a commitment for a further £15 billion, because NPR is predicated on the fact that some of that infrastructure is already there, which is built for HS2. And the leg that most relies on that, unfortunately, because I've always said it was a cheap and nasty option that we were offered, but the leg that does unfortunately rely on HS2 infrastructure more than most is the leg between Liverpool and Greater Manchester via Warrington, and that calls that whole leg into question. And a couple of people have flagged this up. Whoever called it HS3 needs a slap, because it was never about high-speed rail from west to east. It was always about additional capacity, and being a port city, and Hull also being port cities, it was about connecting those two ports up as well and getting more freight onto rail. And we've talked here, and I've learned over many years about the gauge width that you need for freight and all of these things that I never thought I'd do. And I'm buying an anorak. I've learned so much, but it's really important, because that is the main thrust of what we're talking about here, about that additional capacity and not about speed all the time. So for me, I think the north-south connectivity is the precursor really to what we want to do west-east, and therefore those two things are intrinsically linked, and therefore I'll be supporting the motion. Just because other people have thrown this in, you would think that we don't have a part sometimes in the birth of railways, but of course the Rainhill trials, in 200 years, in just 6 years' time, it'll be 200 years since that occurred, and on part of our infrastructure, you can still get there in the same time that it was during the Rainhill trials.
I won't mention a member of Parliament who was killed on the railway line just outside of Liverpool as well. I think, though, just following as you did mention Hull there, can I bring in Councillor Imre Oakley from Hull?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I understand completely the sentiment behind the amendments, coming from Hull being at the end of the line, or as we like to see it, the start of the line. I mean, so far we've been kind of denied electrification, and that's kind of seriously holding up, economic growth in our region, particularly with the potential of the port and being able to get freight, off the road and onto the rail. But really, we need to be supporting the motion and not splitting it up. We need to be united, send a clear message, and so my support is for the original motion.
Thank you. Can I, Mark Rawlinson.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just add a voice from the business community in support of the resolution? I wouldn't support, for several reasons, the amendment, because I think it does allow the politicians in Westminster to start to salami slice, and that point has already been made. So I think I would be fully supportive of the original resolution. What I find really sad about the whole debate about HS2 currently is that, and it's been mentioned by Mayor Rotherham, that all of the commentary seems to be fixated about speed, but it isn't. It's about capacity and freeing up capacity to generate economic growth for the region, for its businesses, for its people. And if we're serious about modal shift from road to rail for freight, that just simply cannot happen without HS2. So I would like to see us be much more vocal around the capacity issue when we are discussing HS2 and supporting HS2. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harker.
Thank you, Chair. I'm representing the Tees Valley, but particularly I'm leader of Darlington Council, and we have a bicentenary in 2 years' time, celebrating the birth of the railways. I know there's a dispute between ourselves and Liverpool as to where it started. For me, the conversation today is deeply ironic. For a number of years, there's been some enthusiasts in Darlington starting to rebuild steam engines, and many of the conversations I've had with them point out that they're building these, what are ancient machines, but some of the infrastructure that they're running on is almost as ancient as the original steam trains. I think, as Councillor Swarbrick spoke about, the decisions that we're making today about HS2 and NPR, it isn't about the next 10 years, 20 years. It is generations of infrastructure that we're looking at. And for me, lots of facts and figures are being presented, but the bigger picture is about the decisions that will be made in London as to whether we get HS2, NPR, neither or both, will affect us for the next 200 years. We in the North shouldn't have to make a choice between HS2, NPR, because if we do, we will forever remain the poor relations for another 200 years in this country. And that's really what's at stake. It's about our future generations and being equal partners within this country. And for me, for us to have to make a choice between these two is completely the wrong thing for us to do. And therefore, I support the motion, and I'm not going to support the amendment, because I feel we would be painting ourselves into a corner, eventually being asked, well, which do you want? And that's the wrong question. We need to make the case that we need both for future generations.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I will be supporting the amendment, because I don't think the amendment is actually asking us to make a choice. I think what the amendment's actually asking us to do is what do we think needs to come first, which is not the same as making a choice between either or. And from the perspective of the people who I'm here to represent and the people of Lincolnshire, Northern Powerhouse Rail will have far greater benefits for the majority of the people of Lincolnshire in terms of expanding the lines that have been, quite let's be honest, not properly looked after and not expanded in the way they should have been the last 200 years. And more people from Lincolnshire will have greater use for Northern Power Rail than they would, in my opinion, HS2. That's not to say HS2 isn't important and won't unlock the connectivity to the south and everything else that it will do, because it will. But the motion is asking, what do we prioritise to come first? I freely accept, as has been mentioned by speakers, that assets in relation to HS2 will need to be in situ for Northern Power House Rail to function correctly. And nobody is denying that. But I think the motion is correct, that actually, because the world has changed a lot since 15 years ago, we do need to say which we want to come first. Not either or, but which we believe is a priority to come first. And on that basis, Chairman, I will be supporting the amendment, because I think it will have the greatest benefit for the people of Lincolnshire and the wider northern part of the country as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Duncan, did you want to come back in? Sorry.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to speak very briefly in defence of the amendment, which I think has been put forward in good faith and hopefully is attempting to be constructive. And in doing so, I'd like to actually use the words of a fellow board member to defend the amendment. It's been reported that a letter has been sent to the Prime Minister, which states, if you are adamant on making changes to the HS2 scheme, we could be open to a discussion about prioritising the northern section of the line between Manchester Airport and Manchester Piccadilly so that it enables NPR to be built first. And that is a letter that's reported to have been sent by Councillor Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester. And our amendment really is very much inspired by Councillor Burnham's attempt to provide a compromise on this issue. We shouldn't have to choose between NPR and HS2. The amendment is not proposing to do that. Mayor Burnham, I think, in his letter is very clear. He doesn't want us to make that choice. We shouldn't be presented with that choice. The amendment is asking us, really, to prioritise delivery of NPR, and I think that could actually be a means to secure HS2. If Mayor Burnham thinks that's a good idea, as is expressed in his letter, I hope that the entire Board of Transport for the North can think it's a good idea too and support the amendment. It is not a choice, but it is hopefully a means to secure the future of the northern leg of HS2. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, right. We're sort of getting people coming back. I think we should try to move this on, but I would like both Mayor Burnham and Councillor Mayor Driscoll to sort of have their points that they've indicated they wanted to, particularly as being as Mayor Burnham's just been referred to. But then if we can try and move on, I think it would be in everybody's interest. But Mayor Burnham.
Well, thank you, Chair. Appreciate you don't want the meeting delayed, and so I'll try not to do that. But I do think I answered the point when I spoke, in that I said I understand the spirit in which the amendment has been put forward. But it anticipates a world when we are forced to choose, I think is what it does, and I don't think we're at that. And we shouldn't accept that we're at that position, because as Mayor Rotherham said a moment ago, this is both HS2 and NPR infrastructure that we're talking about. And certainly in Greater Manchester, if you look at the infrastructure, it is entirely, the infrastructure within Greater Manchester is entirely both, actually. And the point that I tried to get over before is this debate this board has had about what is NPR. It's clear that infrastructure is HS2 at the moment, but it's not entirely clear that there's agreement between us and Whitehall about what is NPR, and hence my worry about the amendment. Now, it is a nuanced sort of thing, and I say I'm not kind of taking a position completely against what you're saying. I'm always open to a discussion, but at this point in time, we've got to send a clearer, stronger. We shouldn't be. We're in danger. The amendment is in danger of second-guessing the government decision, and that's the problem with the amendment. I think Mark put it very well. At this point, it's got to be clear. It's about capacity, north, south, east, west, and the infrastructure in question is badged HS2 at the moment, even though it facilitates NPR, as Steve Rotherham said. So, as I say, I did send a letter. I'm always open to a discussion. Maybe I'll end up having a discussion when the Prime Minister comes to Manchester at the weekend. Who knows? But I think from this board's point of view, I think we shouldn't second-guess that government decision, and we shouldn't leave an opportunity for them to say, OK, and now we've got a plan for NPR, and it doesn't involve the infrastructure that we're actually talking about. And that's a risk that I don't think we should open up at all here today. It's about both, based on the plan. And I think that position shouldn't be weakened at this point in time.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. What I intend to do now is to ask Councillor Driscoll, Mayor Driscoll, for his words, and I just wonder if the proposer of the motion would like to say a few words before I actually try and move on.
Thanks, Chair. Let's clear one thing up first of all. The railway started in Newcastle. That's where they're all built. With locomotion number 1 and the rocket, which powered our industrial revolution. So the resolution as it stands, with the amendment or without the amendment, says we committed to building both HS2 and NPR in full. It's not saying we should not build NPR. It's not saying we should not build HS2. What it's saying is, we don't want to wait till HS2 is finished before we start building NPR. Oliver asked earlier, what do I genuinely believe is going to happen? I'll tell you what I genuinely believe is going to happen. I believe that the government is going to substantially cut HS2, and that I'm quite happy to fight against that. But I also think that even if that goes through, there will then be nothing coming in terms of the northern part of NPR for decades. And that is my real concern. And all of the talk of east-west, north-south connectivity, the geography is such that for the northeast, a huge area, north-south and east-west is exactly the same connectivity. Unless you upgrade the East Coast Main Line and the Leamside Line, we get no benefits out of anything. The full HS2, even before the early cancellations, was going to stop at York. HS2, if it's built, stops 140 miles away from the northeast, 200 miles from Berwick. That's the same distance as Manchester to Liverpool. The idea that if that's the only part that gets built, and then we're waiting an extra 15, 20 years for anything else, is going to give us any economic benefits at all. It's not true. In fact, it would be detrimental, because we would see investment flow to areas that have greater connectivity, and we would be disadvantaged. That's why what the amendment is calling for, and places like Lincolnshire and Tees Valley and other places like that, is that we don't put ourselves in a position of thinking it's a victory to keep HS2 funding, but not get NPR started now.
Councillor Gittins.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We've had a really interesting debate here, and you know, I've been on Transport for the North now probably for about 5 years, and one of the things that's always struck me is that we've always been unanimous. We've never been in a position where we've had this discussion where we're trying to have one place as a priority of another, and quite frankly, in Cheshire West, a lot of the discussions don't benefit us, but I've always supported my colleagues across the north. And our position has always been really, really clear. We need HS2 and NPR delivered in full stop. That's it. No ifs or buts, or well, it could be this, it could be that. We know that the government have scaled back on NPR, they're going to scale back on HS2, and where does that leave us? We want all of NPR and we want all of HS2. And that is it. That is our position. And now to be where, and I do understand where Jamie's coming from, because, you know, I've had similar thoughts myself in the past, but we've all stuck together because we're passionate about delivering for the north. And we owe this to our residents, to all of our residents here in the north, that we keep our position of delivering HS2 and NPR in full. And that's it. And I hope that we can support the original motion.
Okay, I intend to take a vote now. What I'd like to do, it's a very strange voting system. It's one I've inherited. It's not my design. So what I'm going to, in the first instance, I just want to see a show of hands if it is felt necessary that we do need to move to a vote, and I think 2 people have said they want to do that. I will look at the show of hands, I will look at the weighting, and I will see if I need to have a formal vote on the amendment. So those in favour of the amendment, could they please show? So that's 3 people, and their voting weight would not be so. Those against?
That's a very clear consensus.
There is a very clear consensus there. I therefore want to put that the amendment is defeated, and I just want to take a vote on the motion that has been formally moved by Councillor Gittins and Councillor Warbeck. Can I see all those in favour? Those against? That is overwhelmingly carried and is the voice of Transport for the North, I think, in a fairly unanimous way. And if everybody is content with that, that is our recorded vote. Can I move on? Thank you all very much for what I think has been a fascinating discussion, and we will transmit that on. I think the simple fact is a lot of important points came out about that, and not least the fact that we do need to get across the whole issue that HS2 is not about speed, it is about capacity, it is about freeing up the system to allow us to do some of the other things which are so vitally important in the region. Can we move on then to item number 4? It's a great... Darren, do you want to say anything before I invite Robin to speak?
Thank you, Chair. So probably worth just saying that we have today Robin Gisby, who is joining us, and for colleagues who were at Rail North Committee earlier this month,
This is a follow-on from the session that we had with Chris Jackson, who took us through where TPE had got to in terms of their recovery plan. So we're going to hear more today from Robin in terms of expectations for the rest of this year and perhaps more importantly into 2024 and beyond.
Robin, can I very much welcome you to Transport for the North, and we all wish you well in running most of our trains now, be it LNER, Northern and Transpennine. You and I first came across each other when I was Secretary of State, and perhaps I remember mostly the incident at Dawlish, where you'd said to me you'd had problems with a certain signal box that you'd wanted to remove, but it was listed and therefore you couldn't. But the seas intervened on that great storm when it basically washed away the Dawlish seawall, and that's where we had a number of meetings to discuss. So it's a pleasure to welcome you here this afternoon, and perhaps you could outline to us how you see things devolving and evolving as far as TP is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning. I'm very pleased to be. I'm slightly surprised I haven't been here before, actually. I went to the Select Committee a couple of weeks ago as well, which again we seem to have kept our heads below the radar a bit for perhaps a little bit too long. So look, let me expand on a couple of things I might have said there. That fundamentally we're running these railways on behalf of the passengers and the communities they serve. We do care about subsidy. We do care about revenue. We obviously have to care about cost as well. But fundamentally, what we want to do is make these things as well as we can while they're in our care and ownership. I really don't know how long that's going to be. When we first stepped into LNER, it was 5 years ago. I think the Rail Minister at the time said it would be handed back within 2 years. I see no sight of that with any of these trains for some considerable time. And we have always tried to take the right long-term view of what to do with what are fundamentally long-term businesses. So that's our approach. It seems to be working. This is the fourth time we've done it. Each one has been in a slightly different situation. This one is quite tricky. There's several things here that really kind of shouldn't have happened and need a little bit of unpicking, and that's going to take a little bit of time. So a bit of patience about that. I'm not a particularly patient person. I'm having to learn to do that. I would say, because I know you're going to ask me in a bit, there is more pressure on that team to rebuild this railway and develop it than I will. So rest assured that what we're doing at the moment is the right thing to do to stabilise it on top of what we've inherited, but there's quite a way to go there. We've got a difficult industrial relations situation. Short-term progress on that was quite good for a whole lot of reasons, but even getting it back to where all the other train operators are is going to take us a little bit of time. And that's the real focus in the next 2 or 3 months. It is a little bit better. We actually had no P-coding last Wednesday, before anybody asked me about P-coding, which is the first time since December 2021, I'm told. I was told to tell you that today because people care about that. But as soon as we get a little bit of industrial action, cancellations go back up again. And I've said to anybody who'll listen, it says on the train, get across the Pennines quickly, and that's what we want to focus on. This business did get into a few things that it probably shouldn't have done. Like it's going to a few places and stopping at a few places that maybe sometime Northern should pick some of that up. It's got the most complicated rolling stock diagrams. It's got the most complicated arrangements with trade unions and some of the things that happen about the number of crews that change between here and there and all the rest of it. There's quite a lot in all of that to sort out. We will step back a bit in December, and I'm very, very grateful for the support that we've had from people in this room, Rail North Committee, about those plans. They're relatively modest. They will hit the headlines. That will mean there's 3 trains per hour instead of 4 trains per hour off peak from Leeds and a few other things, and we won't go to Scarborough quite as often as we will do. But I do believe that we will run more trains on time post-December than we do at the moment. We're going to run a few less, but we're going to deliver many more of them on time. I would rather promise to run 100 trains and deliver 95 and 96 than promise to run 120 trains and still deliver 90 or 95, because you've probably been in that position. I've certainly been in that position in the last 6 months, where I stood on a platform expecting a Transpennine train to turn up, and it's not there, and there's some announcement about a short-term change to the timetable or something or other. And I also know that the other businesses, LNER and Northern, have to clear that mess up. And trying to move people who've got luggage and suitcases and want to get from Newcastle to Manchester Airport and put them in a Northern train to get them and all the rest of it, that's not a great place to be. So that's where we are at the moment. I think the summary in the paper kind of describes a few things. I will focus on subsidy. I know for each of these railways when I'm going to get them back to a pre-COVID position. I will get LNER back to making a profit. I haven't got a problem about making a profit. I pay a dividend to government. I reinvest that back in the business. What I think is slightly different to the way we do it compared with, I should call them old-fashioned franchises now, because I don't think they're coming back. I don't know what's coming back, but I don't think they're coming back. In that, you would commit to a revenue line that over the years you thought would continue going up, and it hasn't. Even before COVID it wasn't, but it hasn't worked. You then pay a premium to government. That was the Virgin East Coast bid, and then you'd worry about whatever you've got left. We're doing that a slightly different way round. We are running a business. In case of LNER, we generate lots of cash, which is great, and we are reinvesting that back in the business and then deciding what we give to government. And we will get LNER back to where it needs to be. Northern, we will never get that back to where it needs to be because Northern does important, different and other things, as you know, much better than us. With TPE, I really do believe this thing will come back quite quickly in the next 6-12 months. I don't want to put back in December 24 just what we're taking away in December 23. Firstly, I want to do that earlier, and I did commit to that, the Rail North Committee, a few weeks ago. I want to put more back than whatever isn't going to be there in December 23. I've got a real issue there. I've got an issue with the Nova 3s and a big stonking great diesel at the front and the very smart new carriages. It's an appalling train. It shouldn't be running on this network. I get about 5 or 6 working out of 13. I can't maintain them at night in Scarborough. There's all sorts of things. Although they're a very nice, comfortable train to travel in, I've got to do something different. I don't know what I'm going to do differently yet, but I am going to solve that problem. If I continued with those trains for very much longer, then the costs of them, the environmental efficiencies of them, all sorts of things, when you step into something like this and you've got to try and sort it out, as I've been executive chairman for a bit, you do take, and it's my decision, not Chris Jackson's decision, because he wasn't around just at the time, you do take a few decisions that feel slightly unreasonable and slightly brave to get a different level of thinking. So when I look at TPE, I absolutely want to rebuild it as an interurban. It says intercity. Intercity has some connotations to people as old as me. But I do want to rebuild it as the interurban connectivity between all the important places around the neighbourhood where it needs to work, across the Pennines and further north and up to Scotland on the east and west coast. It's doing a couple of things that probably, if you agree, because it's your railway, not mine, I'm just running it for the time being, it probably shouldn't be doing. I'm not quite sure why it's going from Huddersfield to Leeds. I came out of Manchester Piccadilly the other day on a Avanti train, and I overtook something, and I looked out the window, I thought, that's got to be a northern train chugging along like that. And it says Transpennine Express on the side of it. So I think somewhere around this, and this is where you really need to take a role building on the conversation that you've just had in the last half hour, remapping the services in the north, where they will sit, what is the right thing to do for Transpennine, what should be done with Northern, is a conversation that I'd very much like to be involved in as well. There's 2 or 3 bumps in the road out there. I think December 23 should go okay. I will come back to you early in the new year to say, right, we've now got several months of decent performance under our belt. Now we can start looking at putting something back. I'm quite dependent on that in some workforce reform stuff that we haven't settled down yet with both RMT and ASLEF, but I'm kind of hopeful that we will get on with some of that in the new year. And then I want to talk about what do we do with it next. I see it very much as an intercity operator. I don't want to merge it with Northern. I want it to catch up and overtake LNER, which is doing pretty well. And I came up on it on the 703 with me this morning. We were into Leeds, bang on time and all the rest of it. I wanted to emulate that. I've said before about onboard service. It just doesn't work at the moment. It's contracted out. Nobody cares about it. You can send people to Scotland and not feed them or give them a hot drink, which doesn't feel right. So either we make that work or we take the kitchens out and put some more seats in to boost capacity or something. But that's where I want to get to, and that's where I want to rebuild it. Now, we've been through a lot of that. We've had some good support from people at this table and around with partnership, and we will set out something essentially on the 19th of October. So there will be some briefings and background to that. I don't think much of that will be a surprise to what we want to do with it over the next couple of years. The thing I really want to continue to do is to inject some pace into it, some belief and some pace to what it should be. It takes time to do that. It is quite shocking how long, when you step into one of these things, I mean, LNER's performing really pretty well now. It's outperforming everybody else, and we're kind of mildly pleased with that. It took a year to get them going, to get them believing. It took time for Northern. Its Southeastern is the most backward of the four. We were hearing earlier on about infrastructure in London, but actually, if you spent several years wondering whether you're going to get your franchise extended, you haven't got on and developed your railway. And it will take time, but I hope not that long, to get on and sort this thing out. Through the end of the year, and I think coming the new year, this thing will come back pretty quickly. So that's overall where I am. Now, you're going to give me grief about ticket officers in a minute, but can we at least kind of have a conversation around Transpennine, and then maybe, Chair, I don't know how you want to run the meeting, but maybe then we can talk about ticket officers.
Well, Robin, can I first and foremost thank you very much for coming and being available to answer questions. I've got several people indicating they want to ask questions, which won't surprise you. Can I first go to Mayor Braben, please?
Thank you so much, Robin, for those opening remarks. And can I also thank you for your openness, yourself and Chris, really accessible, transparent, really helpful, getting the message out there to the public that this is good news. It's not the same that we've had in the past. And I don't envy you the challenge that you have ahead of you, because it does feel like it was even worse than we thought. So thank you for... Indeed. Indeed. I think as mayors we were told there was a plan for recovery, and I think that was maybe a bit of a pipe dream. But thank you for the work you've done so far. Now, there are a couple of challenges in this recovery. To the public, saying you're going to withdraw some of the services, there is a challenge around capacity. Now, withdrawing the Nova 3, I do understand why you're doing it, how expensive they are, how complicated the training is, and training backlog is a problem for reliability, and trying to get drivers trained on Nova 3 is a problem for that. However, if you're withdrawing Nova 3 and then you're going to boost confidence in TPT, where is that extra capacity going to come from? I know that the Transpennine upgrade is going to give us new trains in the future, but can we work closely together, particularly around overcrowding, that when we've got those 3 carriage trains and you've got 2 sets of passengers crammed into those trains, you're not going to get that confidence from the public. And I know next year you're going to run a campaign to get more people to use rail. Without those extra trains, how are we going to manage that? And we are here to help you with that message to the public.
Chris and I talk about little else on this thing. I think the rest of it will come right. The Nova 3s, let's put them over there for the moment. If we get that wrong, we're in deep trouble, because you have to bring them back and you have to go through driver training and backlog and all the rest of it. That's going to be a pretty uncomfortable thing to do. So the plans over here are, firstly, what do we do with the savings? And I remember being at the Rail North Committee. I mean, those things are costing us 30 million a year, and they don't work very well. You get 2 or 3 of those operating out of 13, that's a lot of money to be paying for not a lot. So what can I do elsewhere with rolling stock around the network with that money? Because back to a conversation you will need to have alongside me is, if we make those savings, what do we do with the money? I don't want to give it back. I want to try and reinvest it in the business somewhere else. Can I, round the edges, do some better things with the availability of some of the rest of it? Yes, I think I can. Well, Chris can. He understands these things better than I do. He thinks I can, so I probably agree with that. And can I probably, over the next year or two, move a couple of services away from Transpennine to refocus it on what it should be doing, as opposed to, under some of the incentives it operated under before, it went off and did some things that really took it outside what it should be focused on. But the capacity issue you've got, some of you can solve that by sensible planning. Why are you running a 3-car train, what were we doing it the other day, a 3-car train in Manchester when there are all the big events, and you've got a 12-car train tootling around, or a 6-car train tootling around Lincolnshire because you just couldn't organise yourself properly. And Chris has got some of that sorted out. But this problem will not be solved by new rolling stock. New rolling stock for Northern, some big orders out there, hopefully they're made some around here, and there's some big orders for TRU. Neither of those will fix this problem. I hope this problem will be apparent in the next 2 years, because then I'm solving a happy problem, because I've got everybody back and I've got more volume, and I've got to solve the capacity issue. I can give you some average numbers. Current loadings are 66%, and if you take them out of the evening peak out here, it goes up to 68% and 69%. But averages will mask some very high fluctuations, particularly on the day. But what you don't want to do if you're trying to rebuild a premium service is have everybody squashed up like this. So it's a very live issue, and we will come back to you with some plans to solve it. The decision on Nova 3 is not made yet, because I haven't yet convinced myself, and I certainly have convinced RNC and everybody here and all the rest of it that it's the right thing. It feels the right thing to do, but I've got to get the detail behind it.
Okay. Mayor Burnham.
Thank you, Chair. And just on that point, Robin, and likewise, thanks for your direct approach and your honesty. We hear it and we appreciate it, and same we get from Chris. So you do have a lot of goodwill from people here. But obviously we've had a long history with this train service, and things that have been said by others, definitely not by you or your team, but others didn't come true. And there therefore is a kind of a thing here that is a trust thing that and we need to obviously to more and more buy into what you're saying. I think one thing we all will agree now is absolutely it was right to put this operator into operator of last resort. That surely is beyond any reasonable debate now. So having done it, we did it for a reason, and you're really getting to grips with things in the way that you've said today. But I do, Chair, just need to reflect the views of the Rail North Committee as Chair of the committee, because obviously you just referenced it, we did have a discussion about all of these things. On the Nova 3s, I mean, obviously they were badged as the sort of the big step up in terms of rolling stock for the north of England, and they are impressive, aren't they? I appreciate your point about the diesel engine, but the actual travelling experience when they do run is good. And I guess the issue we've got, and I think you're aware of this, is if that stock is taken off, it feels again as though it's going to be sent elsewhere, and there's rumours it might be going somewhere else in the country, and we then lose it. And what is then the plan for modern rolling stock for our residents? So I think we kind of, at this point, I think Tracy indicated we can go with it, but we're not going to say they've gone from our system forever until we're satisfied with the alternatives. And I think you kind of indicated that, but that was the firm view of the committee, so that they're not sent anywhere else at this moment in time before we've got a sort of an alternative to look at. Second thing then, quickly, Chair, is around the sort of reinstatement of services. I thought, and I think you were there actually, and Darren and Martin were there, the mood of the committee was 24 at the latest, wasn't it, that we want to see services reduced, and Chris indicated if they could be brought back earlier then he would. And I think that's where we are. And obviously we've had a drop down in the December 22 timetable, and it feels like that's the new normal. This board gave that on a condition that those services will be brought back, and it feels like there's no energy around bringing those services back. The point being, when we lose stuff, it's really hard to get it back, and I think we need a discipline about the reinstatement of those services as your improvement plan works through. December 24 should be the very, very latest. Lastly, I mean, I'm told that total cancellation rates at the moment is at 22%. I don't know if that's the figure that you've got. That's the latest figure that's in my briefing. Because of industrial action implications of rest day working, it's obviously some of that is beyond your control. We accept that, but it's still in the P coding issue. We're glad about that, but there's still a long way to go, isn't there? And
if I haven't got any grief on the day around the stuff that's going on at the moment, action short, the strike, all the rest of it, the trains run fine. But as soon as that comes in, this is still quite fragile.
Just for clarity then, are you saying that all the problem with cancellations is to do with that?
Well, there's some other things. There was a big hole west of Leeds last Saturday, I think, because Network Rail's track fell over or something. So there's other normal day-to-day railway nonsense in some of these things. But the general rest day working agreement, the new proposals we're discussing with ASLEF, and get through the backlog of drivers, these things are attenuating right down to where they should be, 1s and 2%. On your other point, I think I committed, it's in the minutes, at the Rail North Committee that I would come back to you in January or February, and if 3 or 4 things were all coming right, then we would put something back earlier than December 24. The way in which we manage capacity and bring it back should not be linked to railway timetable dates. I mean, December 24 is a kind of internal bit of railway gobbledygook. There has to be a timetable change. If we can get this, when we get this thing back running properly, people will come back quite quickly, and we need to respond to that much earlier than December 24. That's what we'll do.
And can I just say you were on time from Newtonley Willows to Leeds this morning, so congratulations.
I knew you were coming.
Doesn't usually make any difference, but
never works when my wife's on the train, I tell you.
Mayor Driscoll.
Thanks, Chair. Robin, you'll be pleased to know I got a TPE train here this morning. Went to the station. It didn't occur to me to check if it had been cancelled because there has been a turnaround and the consolidation is working. It's a lovely Nova 1 train that we use, of course, and your staff were there offering cups of coffee and things like that, so it was a good experience. That, to echo Andy's point, I think really shows that bringing it into the operator of last resort has worked and really quite quickly. The consolidation approach, I understand that that's a necessary interim. But I don't want to revisit all the points we've been through at the Rail North Committee, partly for time. But we are going to see a 7-train reduction to Newcastle to Durham, 5 trains reduced Newcastle to Darlington. This is going to affect us, and I understand what you're saying to get it back. But I do recall talking to Chris at the Rail North Committee, and some of that, there is always going to be the fragility, particularly about industrial relations, and it's very welcome that you're saying that you're confident of getting this done. I genuinely believe there is a difference between the way you're answering our questions and the way it happened previously. I think so. Thank you on that. But once you've had things cut, it's very hard to get them back. And just to make sure that we are on track, and we will be tracking this and reading all the details.
Mayor Obram.
Thanks, Chair. And there are very real differences between cancellations, delays, which I was delayed today, and short-forming, passengers being able to get onto the actual train, which, according to the statistics, has turned up, but it's very, very difficult for anyone to get on and off because it's only 2 carriages or whatever. So we need to really have a look at the data to see whether there's improvements. It's that Mark Twain thing, there lies, damn lies and statistics. I'm sure that you can show improvement, but unless customers really feel it, customers you call them passengers, travellers really feel it, then actually that pales into insignificance. Just as a matter of some cold comfort, I don't know whether you read the account of the passenger going on Avanti up to Scotland, and just a horrendous journey, 11 hours or something. So at least you can be excused that particular one. But for many customers, it's the frustration, to tell you the truth. I think there needs to be a concerted effort to provide better information, because when you're there and you don't know why it's being delayed or why a cancellation has happened or when your next train's coming up, It's that thing that drives people insane. So if there could be a proper concerted effort to provide better information, I think some of the other things would be less of an issue.
No, I quite agree, thank you. The message that used to come out about, some short-term change to timetable, I don't mean anything to me. And the disconnect there was in the way information was managed within the business. Some of that we fixed. We put people next door to each other, and some of the messages getting out. But it's just as much how you deal with an issue when it's happened and explain to people as preventing it in the first place. Thank you.
Councillor Smith. Thank
you, Chairman. I'd certainly endorse the point that's just been made on cancellations. I've been using Transpennine before it was in the operation of last resort, and sat there and suddenly realised, oh, my train's been cancelled, no explanation as to why, and never found out. And the frustration is immense. On the rolling stock issue, I understand the rationale. It is a deep concern, certainly for Lincolnshire, because those changes in rolling stock were a long, long time coming, and we were on archaic stock before, but I understand the rationale. On the point around having the 6 trains in Lincolnshire, I accept that, say, for example, today in the week, it was quite quiet, but there are weekends when I used to use the service from Barnaby to Doncaster, which stops at Manchester regularly, and that train, even with 6 carriages, was full. So whilst I accept that there are times it's very empty and very quiet, I wouldn't like to have the misnomer that actually it's always quiet, because it certainly isn't. I think the absolute key here is that, as you said, that the stock comes back as soon as it can, but I will pay tribute to you and say, actually, I stopped using TP for personal use to Doncaster, but I have noticed since you have taken over as the operator of last resort, there has been a marked improvement in terms of when they say they're going to be there, they are there, and they aren't delayed very often, and they aren't saying, we're not turning up. They are actually there when they say they're going to be there. So whilst I appreciate it's very difficult and we're not in the ideal situation, just thank you for the improvements that are in situ, and let's try and work together and get the stock back as quick as we can, and keep those improvements going, either in with yourselves as the operator of last resort, or when somebody else takes over as a private entity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Is that on? Yes, thanks for your presentation, Robin. You referred to the Nova 3 trains as being nice and comfortable. It sounds almost apologetic. And there are, of course, some countries in Europe where there are comfortable trains, and I've travelled on Italy and Germany and so on. I'm sure we can do as well as that. I'm slightly confused of what the future of these trains are, because in a recent press release from TPT, the suggestion was, I think, very emphatically that they would be moved to another company, whereas the report here and some of your comments today rather infer a sort of laying aside for a while. If they're unenvironmentally friendly, why are they in service at all? When electrification is at the top of everybody's priorities, for that very reason. And let's remember that ordinary diesel units and hybrid trains, when they're operating in diesel mode, will also have polluting effects. And just finally, on a slightly parochial issue, I understand that Avanti's new timetable will have even fewer trains calling at both Oxenholme and Penrith, which are both within my local authority area. Now, is TPT in a position to make good that further really step backwards in serving the 2 larger towns in the east of Westmoreland-Furness area, or are you also committed to a similar sort of scaling back, because they're not Manchester, they're not Sheffield or Newcastle?
I don't know about the Avanti issue. I'll go and look at that, because that is maybe something we could do. But I'm still very careful about letting TP get too unfocused. I think that's what it did. That's why we need to pull it back. If you look at the list of stations at which it calls, there's some there's some there that you kind of think they really belong in Northern. They shouldn't be in an intercity express operator. No. But I mean, it's a general point. But Oxenholme and all the rest of it is a slightly different given the route it's on. On the Nova 3 thing, I wish we had electrification, because then it would have existed. They were put out there, I think, under something in a franchise bid with First Group, because that was a box that got ticked and things flowed from all of that. If I could find a battery or hydrogen loco to put up the front of them now, I'd do that straight away. Those things that are there at the moment and maintaining them are really, really difficult, because you can't, for example, where they are in Scarborough, you can't run them at night because quite reasonably local people complain about it. So they're big, complicated things to maintain. Their availability is very, very poor. So you're not paying for 13 when you're only actually able to use 2 or 3, and you've got all the additional complexities of driver training. The TPE, the lease we inherited, ends at the end of May. What happens to them then is a discussion I've no doubt will have, everybody will be involved in the department. In a sense, if I've got a different solution that I can satisfy with you will work, and we're all happy with that, then they've gone away somewhere. Where they go, I don't know. They've just gone away. They can go at 100 miles an hour. I can't use them on the East Coast. I wish I could, but I've got the electric locos on the East Coast have fallen to bits, and I'll have nothing that can do 125 on the East Coast 2 years hence. So I've got to get that order through as well. But there's 2 issues really that I'm sure they're on your radar, but we all need to worry about. One is, which nobody's raised yet, but I'll raise it, is the allocation of capacity on the East Coast the back end of next year. Because at the moment TPE are running that extra path, Manchester, Newcastle, everywhere, that's a great thing, but they don't actually have rights to it, and will that go back to LNER or not, in which I will declare kind of foot in both camps and the rest of it. And the second thing is just the huge amount of rolling stock that is coming on this network in the next few years. There's some really nice big orders coming through Northern. There's the Transpennine upgrade stuff that we mentioned as well, and there's a further order on LNER. Keeping sight of that and making sure the infrastructure is ready and the commissioning is ready and all the rest of it is really, really important. Because some of the stuff out there, some of the stuff that's in Northern, for example, is as in bad shape as the Pacers were. It really isn't going to last very much longer. And making sure the new stuff is ordered and turns up is important. You can look at a date to get an order placed, I don't know, October next year for delivery in 2008. Sounds a long time away. Every month you miss that, it's like £1 million decision, because the impact it will have on the business 4 or 5 years' time. So staying on top of rolling stock deliveries is really important.
I recognise the noise problem, having lived close to a route operated by Class 37s in the Highlands some years ago. But we are pioneering hydrogen for transport in Barrow-in-Furness, so I hope there will be more on that, perhaps benefit to your company in the future.
Okay, Councillor Kilbane.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the report. We've all been burnishing our railway credentials here today, so I represent the City of York, which has the best railway museum in the world, which I'm sure you all know because you've all visited it. In the world, without a doubt. And I'll stop the claims there, otherwise we might get to some serious arguments. Just a couple, I don't want to go over a lot of the ground that's already been covered, but the Nova 3 decision, I understand the problems with them. I know your staff hate them. In fact, one guard I was talking to wanted heads to roll over the decision to purchase them. He was so angry about them. I really wished I hadn't started the conversation. But for us in the north, we've already talked about what's happening with HS2 and NPR. The withdrawal of what was the best upgrade we've had for a passenger experience, the withdrawal of that really does feel, and especially with the rumours that they're going down south, it really does feel like levelling down. In the north, we're already feeling as though we're being treated as second-class citizens. So I think we're also in an area where it's difficult to trust. I'm really glad you're getting to grips with Transpennine, because I stopped using them because it was just a lottery when you turned up at the train station as to whether or not you were actually going to get a train that would get you there on time. So I'm glad you're getting to grips with that, but of course there are huge trust issues here with the public, aren't there, because of our experience. So it's ways that we can rebuild that trust, and if there is a promise of improved rolling stock at some point, making sure that that people can actually believe that that's going to happen, because it just feels all the time as though we're actually making backward steps. And also, just in terms of capacity, I'm glad you raised the East Coast Main Line, because actually HS2 has enormous impacts for capacity on the East Coast Main Line, because if it's not built, then that's going to have to keep on carrying the strain. And we are going to have to make those difficult decisions as what do we run on it and what don't we? Is it freight, is it passengers? Because it's only got so much capacity. And finally, a plea really for the far-flung parts of the network. So obviously we're hugely disappointed that there's not going to be through trains all the way to the East Coast to Scarborough stopping, and we're really disappointed that that's going to be a shuttle. We've got real concerns about capacity for the East Coast holiday resorts for next summer and how all that's going to work. And if these are temporary measures, as you're saying, then if you can make sure that you are in conversation with the DFT, because there are plans for investment on the railway infrastructure, and a lot of those plans are based upon current or improved timetables. So we need to make sure that we're reassuring the DFT that we are going to be providing those services. Thanks.
Can I just come back on a couple of things, because I think the Scarborough issue, and it's back to the point that was made earlier about the market we're in at the moment. We're looking at markets that are really changing quite a lot. Work from home and leisure and weekend and business and all the rest of it. It's a little difficult to plot that through. At the front end of the train, LNER, we are seeing quite a growth in slightly upmarket leisure. People paying a little bit more money to sit at the front and get to, go down to town or come up to go up to Edinburgh or travel around the neighbourhood and so on. So I think we have got to adapt much more to a leisure market and a weekend market. It's really busy. Commuting has come back quicker around here than it has in London. The commuting volumes we're seeing into Manchester, into Leeds, into the big conurbations here are better than we're seeing in Kent into London. But understanding the leisure market is important to us. And I think a shuttle to Scarborough in the winter months might be a bit different from a shuttle to Scarborough and some of the holiday destinations in the summertime. So I think that's one of the things we might look at in the next year. Thanks.
Robin, can I thank you very much for both the progress that both you and Chris have made since taking over running the operation, and thank you on behalf of everybody for the work you've done, and also for your openness and availability to come along to us and talk to us and share some of what are your problems, and hopefully listen to us as to what we think some of the solutions will be. So we very much appreciate it, and we look forward to carrying on with that work with you, not just on TPE, but also Northern and also LNER. But a very much appreciated thank you for coming today. Colleagues, I'm sure everybody will endorse that, a much more open attitude. Colleagues, can I ask you, if you don't mind, if I jump slightly on the agenda, because I know some people will have to leave because of timings, and we've had perhaps a longer meeting today than we would normally. But I think given the circumstances, everybody was quite happy with that. But I would like to take item number 7 and 8, because we need sort of a majority and the numbers here. And I know some people have got to leave. So can I ask Paul Kelly, please, to... is everybody okay with that? Nobody objects. Can I ask Paul Kelly just to do items 7 and 8? They may not take very long, but I do need a quorum.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of item 7, the apologies for the extensive nature of the papers, but it is a matter that's reserved to the board, so the approval of accounts is reserved to the board. There is one matter to bring to the board's attention, which is the same issue that occurred last year. It's in relation to the sign-off of the Greater Manchester Pension Fund. Our auditors will not sign off our accounts until the GMPF fund has been signed off. It's occurred last year and it's occurred again this year. They anticipate that the sign-off will occur in October. So what we are proposing for this meeting is that the accounts are approved subject to the sign-off.
of the GMPF fund, and therefore the receipt of the external audit opinion from Mazars. As I said, this was exactly the same approach that we took last year, and they were successfully signed off by the external auditors in October and then formally approved. One of the key areas is that the board delegates a lot of the financial responsibility to a combination of the Audit and Governance Committee, but also the internal auditors and also the external auditors. And we've got Graham Bell, the independent chair of the Audit and Governance Committee, just to give an update on the activity for the year. Graham.
Thanks, Paul. That was quicker than I was expecting. Sorry. Graham Bell, as Paul mentioned, I've been chair of the Audit and Governance Committee for just over a year. This is my first board meeting, and I'd just like to thank you for making it both informative and entertaining. It's quite a threshold, I think. The paper that you have is the annual report from myself as chair of the Audit and Governance Committee. I shan't, conscious of time, I shan't go through the detail from page 99. You can obviously digest that. What I do want to do is to pick out the specific recommendations within the report. The committee's work is all about giving the board confidence. It's about having oversight of performance. It's about focusing on compliance and viability of the organisation. So it's crucial from a board visibility perspective, and all of that information is contained, summarised within the annual report and Appendix 3 and 4. One highlight. I'll just draw out one thing that isn't really obvious from the report. I've been involved in risk and governance for a number of years in a number of organisations outside of TFN, and the relationship that the committee has with the internal auditors, I haven't seen a better relationship anywhere else. We challenge the auditors challenge us, we listen to the auditors listen to us. There is a great transparency, a great relationship, a great level of openness. I just thought that was worth highlighting because it's something that I've reflected on over the last period. So, if I can just pick out the recommendations in the report, just so that we're all on the same page, and for the record, it is recommended that the board approve the corporate governance review and the annual governance statement. It is recommended that the board notes the recommendations in the annual progress report of the Audit and Governance Committee to approve the statement of accounts for 22-23, and it's recommended that the board approve the statement of accounts for financial year 22-23. Hopefully that is clear and sufficient. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Chair.
If I could just add, in terms of the recommendation, it is subject to the sign-off of the Audit Pension Fund that was received in due course.
Mayor Braben.
Thank you, Chair. And it's really good to hear that there's that level of scrutiny from the auditors. Often we get questioned, don't we, who are TFN, what's the financial arrangements, etc. So it's really good to get that reassurance. I don't know if this is the moment to discuss it with the corporate risk register, that the red rag ratings are where there are things that we've discussed as a board already, material variations from funding planning assumptions that underpin medium-term sustainability. A risk TFN could have a reduced role in the rail industry following implementation of rail reform, including the role with Great British Railways. These are risks that we've discussed, but also with the new iteration of the pan-regional partnership. I do think, Chair, if it's possible, to have a more informed discussion about what is the role of TFN going forward, given these RAG ratings have been identified, and there will be a new grouping being developed across the north and across our regions. Given that RAG rating, I think it might be as a matter of urgency.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that is item 9 was Paul, yeah? Yes. Yeah, okay, well, so we'll incorporate that. Can I ask for approval then as to the approval of the accounts and the audit option? Can I just have a show of hands, please? That is overwhelming. Thank you very much. Julia, that's fine, is it? Yeah, thank you. Indeed. And Mayor Bateman, we'll take your point as raised under item 9, and I think we'll try and address that and incorporate it in the minutes so that we return to it at the next meeting as well. Okay, I'll jump back now to...
just do the governance item for the appointment of the independent members.
Oh, sorry. I should have also asked for the appointment of the independent members, which is item number 8. I'm sure there's no problem with that. Everybody in favour? Thank you.
Brilliant.
Excellent. Okay, I will now go back to, although to a degree we've covered quite a bit of it in Robin's presentation, I will ask Darren to give us an update on the Rail North Committee update, which is covered in the report, and then I'll ask Mayor Burnham to come in as well after that. Thank you. Darren.
Thank you, Chair, for that. So, in terms of Rail North Committee, this month, it's in the papers, but there are 3 significant items in there. The first one was around the presentation from Chris Jackson, and in many ways, the information we've heard today from Robin supersedes that. But the point to make there, I think, is that, and this has been alluded to, the relationship with the new leadership of TPE is much more collaborative and open. I think we're working more effectively, and that is an extremely positive development. It's worth just saying that, on that, we do monitor performance of services across the north, and over recent weeks, be it P codes, delays, short-form services, there has been an improvement. That improvement is continuing. But I think we can all recognise, though, that improvement needs to continue, and I think we all recognise that. Related to that point, issues around Nova 3s and the issue of them staying or going elsewhere, that, of course, is a very live issue. I think that the key point that came out of that was for TfN to work with TPE on what other alternatives there may be, and to actually make sure that if a decision is made by this board to remove the Nova 3s, that there is an effective replacement, that something is equally as good or hopefully better for the short term and the medium term. So we're busily working on that, and with the intention to come back to Rail North Committee with that subsequently. So that's the first substantive element. Secondly is around ticket office closures. We discussed that at length at the last Rail North Committee. The latest iteration of our response, our statutory response on that, is attached to these papers today. I think I would make 4 points there. First of all, we see that the consultation is flawed. We feel that the proposals as put forward will have a detrimental impact across the north, and even more so than the rest of the country, generally speaking. And that third point, and this was one that was particularly important for Rail North Committee members, that there is not a strong business case. It offers poor value for money. So they were the 3 reasons for our objection. But the fourth point is this. We need to be able to offer an alternative approach. We need to be able to come forward and offer how this could be dealt with differently. And that is contained within the submission, which Rail North Committee members saw earlier this month. So that's the second element. And then the third one was around the statutory advice on the congestion at Manchester. There's quite a comprehensive document in there that we took to Rail North Committee, and that again is appended to these minutes. So I think essentially they were the key points, but I suspect that Mayor Burnham may wish to add more, Chair.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Darren. Not a great deal to add, because you covered it very well, Darren. So on Transpennine, I think we've been through the issues there. I think there were some comments, sorry Robin, just to throw in extra around standard of facilities on the trains, toilets out of order, those kind of things. I think there was just that issue maybe has been missed a little in the previous discussion, but colleagues were keen that was focused on as well. Ticket offices was the big discussion, and I think remains a huge concern for us all. Given that, I think as Darren just said, we don't have the contactless that other parts of the country have. We have stations that are inaccessible for many of our residents, and I'm going to come on to the issue of disability access in a moment. There are a whole host of reasons why colleagues felt this was a flawed consultation and a flawed proposal. And obviously we are awaiting, I think, if I'm right, Chair, Transport Focus sending their official response to the consultation to the government. I don't believe that's happened yet, has it? So we're in a limbo period. I think the members of the board were clear we're not against reform, and we can see much potential for the devolution of stations and ticket offices to some of the combined authorities and local authorities represented around this table. But any proposals for reform have got to be based on no loss of staff and support across the system, because the flaw in the proposal is it's not just move people out from behind the glass as it was put forward. This is a huge cut to the level of people support that passengers will find, where the hours of support at stations are like a 1 hour a day or 2 hours a day, I think particularly in the northern proposal. So for many people that's no good, because stations will be deserted for large parts of the day. So behind this is a huge cut to staffing, which actually in the end probably doesn't make, as Darren said, a business case if older people, disabled people are pushed away from the railways. The revenue falls, people's trust in it drops. I think we are in danger of going into a managed decline feeling on the railways, and this consultation really points to that. And that's why the members were very clear that any change for reform should be based on no loss of human resource with regard to the service. If I could just then lead into the issue about accessibility of train stations. We were grateful to officers for presenting a accessibility report on the 600 train stations of the north, and if members of this main board haven't seen it, I would suggest it's worth a look, because it is, as Mayor Braben just said, quite a shocking kind of reflection on the state of our infrastructure. The statistic that sort of leaps out is this one, 48%. That refers to the level of, quotes, desirable standard of step-free access at our 600 stations. So 52%, in other words, do not have a desirable standard of step-free access. There are other issues as well. 89% have an induction loop. Well, what about the 11% that don't? 38% have physically accessible waiting shelters. The weather ain't always the best in these parts of the world. 77% have a PA system. It's not great. And if you take ticket offices out of the mix, this becomes an even bigger problem for the people who have those accessibility concerns. And I think this is an issue that the railways have got a blind spot about, to be honest with you. I don't think they have got disability access issues at the kind of level that they need to have them. They are seen as a low priority, when actually the notion that some of our residents are excluded from these facilities and from travel is a top order issue, and the railways needs to see it as a top order issue. And it's why the committee said that there should be a task force established to develop a reporting approach on these statistics and measures to improve them. And it should come. And as chair of the Rail North Committee, I want this issue to be not the last on the agenda. We moved this item up the agenda on the day. It's got to be seen as a first on the agenda item. If some people can't use the railways, that's massive for them, and we need to be dealing with that with much greater urgency. And I think that the railways, we understand there's lots of pressures on the railways, but the lack of ability for some people to even use them should be a much higher priority. So I hope the board will support that task force, and I hope the issues that come out of it will come to this board as well, Chair, because I think the figures, when you see them, are shocking. Just then, lastly, on that statutory advice on the Manchester task force. Obviously, I've just taken my chair hat off for a minute and just putting my GM one on. We have accepted it only on the condition, though, that platforms 15, 16 are not completely taken off the table. We have never seen a plan from the rail industry, even though we've been promised one repeatedly over the 7 years I've been there, that there's alternatives to mean that they're not needed. We've never seen that. And consequently, we had a Transport and Works Act order for those platforms. I think you may have even signed it off as Secretary of State, Chair. And to lose that specificity with vaguer statutory advice is a concern for us, and that's why we are clear that they should be considered and they should be on the table. And in agreeing to this, we are in no way saying at this point that we've given up on platforms 15 and 16. And we also need a timetable for this. That December 22 timetable does not get fixed for all of the areas represented around this table until the capacity in central Manchester is fixed. And the dragging of feet on this issue by the rail industry is in the end that sign of just sort of not being serious about a deadline to sort out the problems of the north. So that was the extra just to add to Darren's comprehensive presentation, Chair. But it was a good meeting of the committee. But if I could finish by asking you perhaps to bring a discussion on disability access to this board at some point, because I think our disabled residents, our older residents, need to see these issues being given a higher priority, in my view. If you get things right for disabled people, you get them right for everybody, because then the standards of access are great for everybody. Thank you, Chair.
I think that is certainly something which has come out of that report, which has been able to be highlighted. So I think further work does need to be done on that, and I can assure you that that is something that is taken on board. I've got a few people wanting to come in. Councillor Gittings, Mayor Braben and Councillor Smith, I think, so far, and then Councillor Hughes as indicated.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the report. It's excellent, and I support everything that Mayor Burnham has just said. I would like to, though, put forward the argument about women and safety on our railways. That's really, really important. I know Mayor Braben is doing a lot of work around violence against women and girls, and we're starting a commission in Cheshire West, and I know 50% of the population probably don't feel safe if we were to go out and ask them, and if we've got ticket closures and trains without guards on, is that actually putting women off using our transport system? So I would like in the future for us to have a look at that, because I think it's something that we're just missing a trick here, and it's something that we need to address, I think, as a matter of urgency. That's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Councillor Braben, Mayor Braben, sorry.
Thank you, and thank you, Louise, for highlighting the safety of women and girls. We've just launched our Just Don't campaign, which is male behaviour change campaign. I shouldn't be bothered by these things, but it's had over 1 million views on TikTok. So I would encourage all partners to please do share it, because this is a collective effort. We need men as allies, and it would be great to get that out to your network. So thank you for that mention. Can I just pick up what Andy was saying, particularly around rail accessibility in West Yorkshire? 71% of our stations don't have step-free access. All of those people that can't get it onto our railway network, let alone use a ticket office, we're doing what we can with the money that we have, working with Northern in particular. But I really hope that we can have this conversation about the priority to make sure that rail is for all. So I'm really pleased that that's been raised. On ticket office consultation, in West Yorkshire we have 19 ticket offices. That's going to be reduced to 3. And now we hear that Huddersfield, which was one of the 3, is going to be taken out of that thinking later on in the future. This doesn't make any sense when Transpennine upgrade is going to be with us for a number of years. There's going to be disruption, delays and cancellations because of the upgrade. We will absolutely need people in a ticket office to support those who are trying to make their journeys. And when we're hearing the pushback from government that this is not about staffing reduction or staffing hours, this is just about where we place staff, I am very concerned about that narrative, because the proposal in West Yorkshire sees 59% reduction in staffing hours Monday to Saturday and a 66% reduction on a Sunday. Now, we've seen railways come back in footfall over the weekends much faster than in the week. There are more people using our rail network over the weekend for leisure, and yet we are seeing staffing reductions at a time when people are going to be using it. So I really don't see how that's going to work, and I do support the campaign. And I know there are many groups campaigning against this, that this has to be looked at again by government, because we have to have further clarifications on what all this means. And finally, just on the statutory advice from TfN in relation to Manchester congestion, I really support this advice, but we have similar issues in Leeds. You'll know that Leeds station is at capacity, if not over. And also we are building stations as a combined authority that are going to bring people into Leeds. So what is the advice around that? And also Bradford has similar capacity issues. So could I suggest that TfN look at these pinch points, and that may be included in the next statutory advice to government? Thanks.
Thank you, Chairman. I wholly support the recommendations and I endorse Mayor Burnham's and others' comments about the very poor state of physical disabled access on our northern stations. I just want to talk solely about the ticket office closure, because apart from the fact that it's hit us between the eyes and astonished us, the lack of any apparent pre-discussion with regional transport bodies, with local authorities, and particularly with user groups is absolutely staggering, especially at a time when, for example, Northern, I think their campaign is called Take the Train, are actively trying to encourage people to come back onto the railways. But many of those people do rely on physical ticket office to get the tickets. For example, at Appleby in Westmoreland, and that's actually the name of the town, Appleby in Westmoreland, even before local government reorganisation, 40% of outward journeys are purchased at the ticket office there. So anybody who says that, we recognise patterns of buying tickets are changing, more has been done online, but actually 40% is quite high, and there are similar figures at other stations within my local authority area and probably all around the area, probably all around the country, perhaps particularly in rural areas. There's an offer in the report in paragraph 7.3 to possibly distribute TfN's own consultation paper to members. I'd very much like to see that, and I expect other members of the board and scrutiny too might also like to see it. The actual status of railway stations as community places of gathering and meeting people could very well be enhanced, and I feel sure that this is something that TfN will want to be promoting. There is, Martin's nodding, there is some reference to it in the report, and there's a great dearth of community meeting places. I've seen good examples of where railway stations can have some of their defunct rooms used for that sort of purpose. And we value our ticket office staff, and the 100,000 people who signed the national petition to government is an endorsement of that, I think, in itself. They do a great job. It's great to actually see a real person when you're travelling, and let's fight the closures as hard as we possibly can.
Thank you, Chairman. I absolutely endorse what Mayor Burnham said around disability. As someone who is disabled, trust me, they're not easy to use, and my disability in comparison to some others is quite minor. Even when there are ramps, and I'll use Barnaby where I've come from today as an example, they are so steep going up you can't push a wheelchair up them, and they are so steep coming back down, if you let go of it or you can't keep hold of it, you're going to have an accident in it. So they might have a ramp there, but in real terms it's not practical. In terms of ticket offices, we've already heard how leisure travel is actually being used more than if you like, traditional rail travel pre-pandemic. For people to feel comfortable to use that, you absolutely have to have ticket offices or at least a member of staff somewhere on that station that says, yes, you need to go this way, or this way. There are many stations in Lincolnshire and we don't have either. And I'm sure that is mirrored across the north as well. If anything, we need to be increasing the number of ticket offices we have, not decreasing them. That's not only for safety and convenience of users, but it's also for users who don't have bank cards. A good friend of mine doesn't, and so if he wants to use the railway, he absolutely needs a ticket office. Otherwise, he actually can't use the railway at all because he has no means of purchasing a ticket outside of a ticket office. And also, on the technology front, yes, you can purchase your tickets online and then pick them up, but I'll use my case again. I've been to Barnaby a number of times, and because the machine is outside when it gets very cold, the machine can sometimes decide not to work, which then means if the conductor on the train isn't there or doesn't see you, if you get to the other end, you've quite legitimately paid for your tickets and quite legitimately can't get access to them. If you say I came to Leeds or another station where I had barriers at the other end, I'd be in a bit of a problem because I actually wouldn't be able to get my ticket even though I quite legitimately paid for it. So this whole premise of everybody wants digital tickets to go online, no they don't, A, and B, certainly on digital tickets, I'm 29 and I much prefer to have a physical ticket in my wallet because I know where it is, I know where I'm going, what I'm doing with it, and all the rest of it. But I would certainly welcome the disability access to come to this board, and I'd certainly welcome the chance to be of support on that as somebody who is actually disabled and has used the railways and does. So if I can be any support on that, Chairman, I'd welcome the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to make the point that when you exclude anybody from potentially purchasing a ticket, whether that's through disability or closures of ticket office, what seems to be lost is that you will inevitably drive down revenue and therefore make the whole travelling cost uneconomic. And I think it's quite lazy just to say we can save money by closing ticket offices. What I would do is I would use that as an opportunity to generate revenue and actually promote additionality on the railways rather than just call it a bean counting cost-saving exercise, because actually it won't be. You will actually lose revenue, and there's an opportunity to really drive revenue from this if it's handled properly. I'd also highlight the visitor economy, particularly with overseas travellers. We in our region have a big visitor economy. Those people who perhaps don't have access to, English language in the first place, they want to have support on the station, and therefore it's a revenue thing that I think we're missing.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's been a very useful discussion. Actually, some of the work that is thrown up as a result of our response to the initial consultation process has been very useful, and we need now to follow that up along with what Mayor Braben and others have said. And I think it has given us a very good trail of work of identifying some of the problems we've got and trying to work out ways in which we see those overcome and move forward. Okay, if that's everything, we'll move on to the next item.
Just make sure. Can I just ask, Chair, if we are endorsing the response and agreeing the updated advice, just to be clear from the minutes. Yeah.
So, formal vote on that, right? Thank you very much indeed. I keep forgetting these votes. We're far too consensual to need votes most of the time. Can we then move up to what is a report today on the Strategic Transport Plan? Obviously, a lot of work has gone on to this. We're not actually endorsing it, but any changes that need to be made would need to be notified very soon. We'll be actually approving it at the December meeting. But, Katie, can I ask you to deal with this, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'll take the paper as read because I know we're very short on time. I think first and foremost a massive thank you to you and your teams. 649 responses across the 12-week period. We beat the last consultation by 100, but it gave us a huge diverse a sense of feedback and advice, which was so helpful. But there are 4 areas that we wanted to just seek your steer on today, ahead of revising the plan and, as the Chair said, bringing that back to you in December. The first one is around the strategic outcomes. The vision and strategic outcomes were broadly accepted, but we are, and to confirm therefore, we are not proposing to change the economic ambition, which is grounded in the Northern Powerhouse Independent Economic Review. We're also not proposing to change our decarbonisation ambition, which is embedded within the Transport for the North decarbonisation strategy, and which we will be updating between now and 2025. And we're not proposing to change the ambition around transport-related social exclusion, which was a new addition this time. There was some commentary that we had back as part of the consultation as to whether we could go a little bit further and a little bit faster, but we've considered that very carefully with the underpinning evidence we've got. And judge at this point that it would be appropriate to continue with the ambition as set out, but ensure that we keep that regularly under review with the monitoring and evaluation. And I think the conversation we've just had around accessibility just shows how important transport-related social exclusion is. So I think it's a starting gun for further discussion and debate in that area. So I want to check that the board is comfortable that those strategic ambitions remain as set out. I'll just pause perhaps to see if there are any feedback on that. Thank you. The second element that we wanted to discuss with you today and seek your steer on is around the right share metrics that we've set, and also the Vision Zero metric. These were very much about setting our ambition as Transport for the North, about where we wanted to get to in encouraging mode shift. And feedback again from the consultation indicated we might like to go a little bit further in some places, and also introduce a degree of flexibility. So we're recommending that, in line with what many of you done within your own authorities, that we combine the mode shift metrics around public transport and around active travel to be captured as one, as sustainable modes, and be able to report on that, which allows the flexibility according to different places and people. We're also proposing that we move the freight share from a doubling to a tripling of freight share road to rail by 2050. And that has been supported not only by consultation feedback, but by the evidence that we've got, that we believe we can rely on from our future travel scenarios, and similarly the feedback directly from industry that have said they want to see that ambition and believe actually there is actions we can take in the short to medium term to address some of the capability and capacity issues that are holding us back in that area. We were very clear from the outset, your officers, you were very clear that you wanted a metric in there around safety, and we've looked again at the Vision Zero around reducing the number of people killed and seriously injured on our roads, and we're recommending that that remains within the strategic transport plan, but again we keep it closely under review to see if we might want to accelerate it or look at something a little bit different in the future. We're not proposing to make any changes to the private car metric that is within there around maintaining levels as they are now. Can I therefore please just check that the board agree with those recommendations around those metrics?
Thank you. I would say yes, except the only thing I do have concerns is the Vision Zero. I would like us to be ambitious about that, and you've said 2050. I wonder if we could bring that further forward, given that some of the feedback that our consultation came up with. And I appreciate you've looked at that and thought it's probably not achievable, but actually 2050 is a long way away. Why should anybody die on our roads? And I think I would like us to see us being a bit more ambitious. I don't know what other people feel around the room, but I think I know a lot of councils have signed up to Vision Zero themselves, so I'd like us to look at that again, really. Thank you.
To support what Louise said, we're taking a lead on Vision Zero in West Yorkshire, and my Deputy Mayor, Alison Lowe, chairs Vision Zero board, and as ambitious as we can be, please, because as the point is made that as every year goes by, needlessly, people die on the roads. Also, just to thank you for including mass transit and light rail in the plan. Mass transit cannot be forgotten in our conversations because it's so important, not just to West Yorkshire but the wider region across the north. and obviously light rail impacts Liverpool and elsewhere. So thank you for listening and good work.
Thank you. Yes, I'd endorse the point about the moving the target on the safety, and of course also around the freight, which of course resonates with our determination made in the first thing that we talked about this morning around capacity of the network to carry it. So absolutely, let's say what we believe in.
Councillor Hughes?
Well, if we're endorsing modal shift, and I know we are, I'm pleased about that. My local authority has concerns about TfN's apparent promotion of internal aviation, which the report admits is problematic. But we've just, only an hour or so ago, clearly enunciated our backing for HS2, and that one of the chief purposes of HS2 is to supplant internal aviation. So that's an essential part of modal shift. And light rail's been mentioned, and I'd really like, where time permits and resource permits, TfN to look into light rail in rural areas, especially where there is a significant visitor incoming population, because it would help us take a lot of our congestion off our roads and off our town centres.
Thank you, Chairman. As someone who's lost their father in an RTC nearly 15 years ago, I certainly endorse moving that goalpost forward, because 2050 is a bleeding long time away, and to have other families have that knock at the door, I don't want any family to have that on any road in any part of this country. So if there is something, even if it's a small thing that we can do, we should do, and we should certainly seek to do it as quick as we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a few points. I'm pleased to see the recognition of the unique challenges of rural areas to be highlighted. I'm also pleased to see the emphasis on freight and logistics also. Just going on to the right share targets, though, I just have a slight concern that we are signing up to a zero overall regional increase in private car vehicle mileage based upon around a baseline of 2018. Why 2018? And are we, by implication, restricting those parts of the north where, even on current best case projections on Northern Powerhouse Rail, etc., they will be excluded from reliable and accessible public transport, where car journeys are even more important in those areas. And it just strikes me as there's a little bit of a conflict there.
I was going to say, I'm happy to have a conversation offline about that, around how some of the metrics have been reached. And I think that the important point I'd like to just leave the board with is that these are northern wide, and we recognise that places will achieve them at different rates and at different times and in different ways. And I think that was where we wanted to try and bring the flexibility in. But I think possibly a more detailed conversation, because there is work that we now need to do to update that baseline, and that'll take us a little bit of time, certainly beyond December. Heard very clearly the message about the Vision Zero target. We will take that away. I think there are some opportunities to potentially align to what London is doing. They've got 2041. So let's have a look at those and come back. When we bring the STP back to you in December, we'll bring some clear advice around that. I think finally then, would just like to note the comments about aviation. We have got an international connectivity position that this board agreed last year, and I think there has been some confusion we've seen through the consultation about what that means. So we're looking to make sure we clarify and recouch that within the document.
Internal aviation. Sorry if that didn't come across clearly.
No, it is, and the internal aviation is part of the broader international connectivity position that the board agreed. So apologies, Councillor, I wasn't clear on that point. But we've got to take the aviation point away. It's another aspect of work that we want to strengthen within the narrative, and I think that brings me on to just the third section, really, which does pull out the point about aviation, international connectivity, and areas that we wish to strengthen the plan, which includes the light rail, buses, coaches. So I want to just ensure the board are content that those are areas that we strengthen the case for within the plan. And I think the final section of the paper was then to highlight, as you often would expect in consultations of this size, new areas of work or areas where actually as a group of partners we may want to do more work to explore the evidence and the case for those, and that was around, for example, affordability, behaviour change, and actually, again, that better articulation of some of the challenges in rural areas. And finally, to ensure that while this is a strategy, this is our ambition as Transport for the North for 2050, but what needs to sit behind it and what we will want to work on with you and your officers over the coming weeks and into next year is the implementation advice and the implementation plan to support this. And we had some of that initial conversation with the Partnership Board earlier this month, and our intention is to bring advice around implementation alongside the plan when we return it to you in December. Thank you, Chair.
Mark.
Yeah, please. I'm really sorry to be a pedant in relation to this right share target thing about private vehicles. Are you making a differential between the internal combustion engine journeys and electric vehicle journeys? What's the driver? Because I think we're perhaps sending mixed messages there.
I'm going to just bring Lucy in. Lucy Jakes with us today, who's our lead officer on this.
Yeah, thank you. It's a really good question, and we've really considered this at length. I mean, fundamentally, the outcomes that we're trying to achieve need to be driven by some of the evidence we've got, and that best available evidence around this is based on that future travel scenarios work we did in 2018. Within the report, we do detail we're currently going through some work with our partners to refresh that, and it's our intention over the next year as we complete that work to come back to partners to revisit this particular target once we understand the latest data. But I think the point around the private vehicle demand target, it's really important to think about that in the context of the other targets and outcomes that we've set. So particularly in the context of the economic growth target that aligns to the Northern Powerhouse Independent Economic Review, and our aspiration there to significantly achieve transformed economic growth, which would attribute to an extra 118 billion GVA. So it's really important when we've looked at that target that's set in that context of a North that wants growth, and we know with growth comes the need to travel. So I think there's kind of a baked-in assumption there, actually, that in terms of actual personal private car use, there is a baked-in assumption around that, and there's some further detail that we could circulate that supports that. But as I say, fundamentally, we're revising the evidence based on this to feed into our future travel scenarios.
That doesn't hang together at all.
Okay, I'm sure that's something we can have a discussion off piece about as to ensure that the points that you're making, Mark, are actually covered as far as the greater conversation that we need to have about this at the December meeting. Can I thank both Lucy and Katie for all the work that's been going into this. Sorry it's been a bit squeezed today because of other things that have taken place, but we'll have a much bigger discussion in the December meeting. Okay, thank you. Can I thank everybody for their attendance? We delayed our start by 15 minutes. We haven't quite caught back the time, but I think we've had a very thorough discussion on some very important issues for the North this morning. So thank you all very much for attending, and I close the meeting. Thank you.